They said I was just the housewife, the help, the invisible one folding laundry in silence. But 5 years later, I walked back through the doors of their company, and this time I wasn't there to clean up after anyone. If you love stories about quiet strength, poetic justice, and the kind of transformation that makes you cheer out loud, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. New stories every week, each one more powerful than the last. Now let me tell you how it all began. My name is Margaret Darnell, though. For most of my adult life, people simply called me Paul's wife or Edith's daughter-in-law. Occasionally, I was the one who makes a great lemon tart at the church potlucks. But more often, I was just invisible. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 15, I've lived in the Darnell family's sprawling colonial home in Raleigh, North Carolina. A house that's been in Paul's family for 3 generations. It sits on a quiet tree-lined street where the neighbors all know each other's business, and the hedges are trimmed with almost militaristic precision. From the outside, we look like a picture-perfect Southern family, a hard-working husband, a dutiful wife, 2 polite children, and a matriarch who ruled the household with sweet tea and subtle tyranny. What they didn't see, what I didn't allow them to see, was the slow erosion of identity that came with every "just help us out for now," and every "we'll figure it out once things settle down." I had dreams once. A promising accounting degree from UNC Chapel Hill, a job offer at a top regional firm, plans to sit for my CPA exam before 30. Then came Paul with his dimples, his charming confidence, and his vision of building a logistics company from scratch. "I need someone who believes in me," he said, and I did. I always did. Belief is a beautiful thing until it becomes blind. The first few years weren't bad. I helped him file his LLC paperwork, set up his QuickBooks, even drafted his first investor pitch deck. But as the business grew, my role shrank. Paul brought in his younger brother Ryan, and suddenly I wasn't support anymore. I was in the way. That's when Edith moved in. Paul's mother, the widow with the spine of a drill sergeant and the charm of a Southern belle. She insisted she didn't want to burden us, then promptly installed herself in the master suite and reorganized the entire house within a week. "Margaret," she once told me while folding my own laundry, "you're not doing nothing. You're just not doing anything that counts." I should have left then. But I had 2 children under 10 and no savings of my own. Everything was in Paul's name. He said it was simpler that way. This brings us to the night everything changed. It was a Thursday in early spring. I'd just finished cleaning up after dinner, grilled chicken and roasted potatoes that no one had thanked me for. The kids were upstairs doing homework. Paul and Ryan were in the den, whispering over financial statements, like I couldn't possibly understand what net operating margins meant. Edith was rewatching Murder, She Wrote and muttering about how the new actress playing Jessica Fletcher didn't have Angela Lansbury's authority. Then Paul called me in. He was holding a manila folder. Ryan stood beside him, arms crossed like he was guarding state secrets. I knew that look. I'd seen it when Paul told me we'd be postponing our anniversary trip because the business needed liquidity, or when Edith decided she would be redecorating the kitchen in colonial blue, despite my protests. "This is just a formality," Paul said, sliding the folder across the table. "It's about the house." My pulse thudded once. Then again. "What about the house?" "It's still in Mom's name technically," he said, avoiding my eyes. "But the bank needs it under Ryan's name to refinance the company's expansion loan. Just for collateral. Temporary." I opened the folder. It was a quitclaim deed. Signed by Edith. Blank for my signature. "You're asking me to give the house to your brother," temporarily, Ryan added. "It's just paper. Legalese." I looked at the document again. The legal language was boilerplate, but one clause stood out, buried halfway down the page in dense type. No rights of reversion upon satisfaction of debt obligation. They thought I wouldn't notice. I closed the folder. "No." Paul blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I won't sign away the house. Not to Ryan. Not to anyone." "It's not even your house," Edith called from the living room, her voice surprisingly sharp for someone 2 rooms away. "You never put a dime into it." I stood up. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I cooked every meal in this house, scrubbed its floors, raised children here, held your hand through tax seasons, Paul, helped you restructure your entire cash flow model when the trucking contracts fell through in 2016. Don't tell me I haven't paid into this house. Paul's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. And that's when I realized something deep and cold and final. They didn't see me, not really. To them, I was a piece of furniture with a grocery list and a mop, something useful until inconvenient. So I did what none of them expected. I walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase, took the savings bond my father had left me in a fireproof envelope behind the closet safe, and I left. Not a word, not a tear, just the click of the front door behind me. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And none of them, not Paul, not Ryan, not even Edith, had any idea who I was about to become. I arrived in Asheville just after midnight, the Blue Ridge Mountains cloaked in a soft mist that made everything feel hush sacred. It was the first time in nearly 2 decades I had slept alone, not just in bed, but in silence, without footsteps upstairs or someone calling from the kitchen. And I wasn't scared. I was free. I'd found a room above a used bookstore, $475 a month, no pets, one window with a view of the alley. I could hear the hum of the printing press at night, and the smell of ink seeped up through the floorboards. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No one told me when to cook or clean, and no one stood behind me with crossed arms and disappointment in their eyes. I took a job at the Honeycomb Cafe on the south end of town. They needed a dishwasher and someone to prep scones at 5 a.m. It wasn't accounting, but it paid in cash and gave me time to think. It also gave me a way back. In my off hours, I walked to the local library and reacquainted myself with the world of finance that I'd once navigated with ease. GAOP updates, IRS changes, SEC reforms. The rules had evolved, but my brain still worked. It was like remembering a language I once spoke fluently. Within 6 months, I enrolled in night classes at Blue Ridge Community College. I took the bus, sat in classrooms with kids half my age, and aced every exam. My professors noticed. So did a woman named Claire Duval, founder of Duval & Associates, a boutique financial advisory firm specializing in women-owned businesses. She guest lectured one evening and stayed after to answer questions. I stayed too. She asked about my background. I gave her the watered-down version, paused career, family obligations, now returning. She gave me her card. 2 weeks later, I was interning at her office 3 mornings a week. Paid, real work. Claire didn't coddle, she demanded precision, discretion, and strategic thinking. I thrived. In 2 years, I passed the CPA exam, obtained a certified divorce financial analyst CDFA credential, and became Claire's senior associate. We handled asset valuation, trust structuring, hidden income tracing. I learned to read between financial lines to spot manipulation disguised as accounting strategy. I knew how men like Paul operated. That was my edge. By year 3, I'd saved enough to leave the bookstore room. I rented a studio loft overlooking the French Broad River. Hardwood floors, exposed brick. A fireplace I never used but loved staring at. I hung one photo on the wall, my children aged 12 and 14, taken the year before I left. I didn't want to forget why I was doing this. I kept tabs on them from afar. My daughter Olivia got a full ride to Duke. My son Grant became obsessed with robotics. I mailed them birthday cards with gift cards, tucked inside, always unsigned. Just Mom. Never love Mom. I couldn't afford emotional pressure. Not yet. Paul never called. Neither did Edith. But then one Friday morning, something shifted. Claire came into my office with a thick dossier and a spark in her eye. We've been invited to a private investor roundtable, a new opportunity, a logistics firm seeking capital for a national expansion. You're going to lead the initial diligence. I opened the file. My breath hitched. Darnell Freight Solutions, LLC. There it was in black and white. Paul's company, or what was left of it. Revenue down 38% over 3 years. 2 lawsuits pending over late deliveries. A $1.2 million SBA loan nearing default. The documents were detailed burn rate, margin erosion, even a flagged internal audit noting unexplained withdrawals by co-founder R. Darnell. Ryan, they were drowning. Claire kept talking. The Lantern Fund is considering partial acquisition. If you want in, I'll back you. You'd be lead on due diligence. First time we've tested you at this level. I nodded slowly. I want in. Good. Then get ready. You're meeting the current owners next week in Raleigh. Raleigh, where it all started. Where they laughed as I packed my bags. Where they assumed I'd vanish irrelevant. I closed the folder. They had no idea the woman coming to evaluate their company wasn't just a potential investor. She was the ghost they tried to bury, and I was about to become their reckoning. The glass-paneled doors of the Darnell Freight Solutions boardroom swung open precisely at 10:00 a.m. I stepped inside, wearing a navy suit, tailored just last month in Asheville. Modest heels, a silver pen clipped to my leather portfolio. Nothing extravagant, just sharp, structured, deliberate. I recognized the conference table immediately. Cherrywood custom-made, the same one Paul had chosen 10 years ago, when he thought aesthetics would impress clients more than accurate balance sheets. I'd helped him pick it back when my opinions were still invited. Now I was here as a stranger. Paul stood to greet me, hand-extended smile, wavering the moment he fully registered who I was. Maggie. I shook his hand. Hello, Paul. It's Margaret now. His grip faltered. He looked older, paler, heavier, with faint lines that hadn't been there when I left. His hairline had retreated slightly, and the bravado he once wore like cologne was noticeably faded. Ryan was already seated, drumming his fingers nervously against a printed spreadsheet. He blinked twice, clearly stunned. You're the rep from Lantern, no? I replied, taking my seat. I am Lantern. The silence was delicious. Paul tried to recover. This is unexpected. I pulled out the briefing folder. Your company's seeking $4.3 million in Series B financing to prevent collapse of your Savannah and Charleston contracts. Your request includes capital infusion, debt absorption, and partial equity conversion. Correct, Ryan cleared his throat. Yes, but we were told a committee would review this. I am the committee, I said, flipping to the next page. Lantern Fund does not operate through layers of bureaucracy. We believe in targeted empowerment, but we also require forensic-level due diligence before touching distressed assets. Paul blanched at the word distressed. I continued. Over the next 10 days, I'll be conducting a comprehensive audit, full access to your books, vendors, and payroll. Any resistance will immediately terminate investment consideration. Ryan scoffed. What, you don't trust us? I looked him dead in the eye. Correct. Paul ran a hand through his thinning hair. We didn't know. We thought you were gone. You didn't ask, I replied. You assumed. There was a knock. A junior associate brought in coffee, placing it carefully between us. She glanced curiously at me, clearly sensing the tension, but trained not to ask. I took the mug without breaking eye contact with Paul. You built something here, I said, gesturing to the company logo on the far wall. But you neglected the spine: compliance, integrity, financial sustainability. Now you're hemorrhaging contracts, and the bank's calling your notes. Paul sat down slowly. I went on. In 2016, I advised you to incorporate internal controls. You said it wasn't urgent. In 2018, I flagged margin discrepancies. You laughed. And in 2019, when I noticed you borrowing against the property, you said I wasn't part of the business. He was quiet now. Ryan's shoulders were rigid, his face reddening with each sentence. I let the silence breathe before adding, You're lucky I still believe in second chances. But this time, you don't get to dictate the terms. Paul finally spoke. What exactly are you offering? 70% equity. Lantern absorbs your debt injects. Capital restructures management. Ryan stood up. You're out of your mind. You think we'd just hand over our company? You're not handing over anything, I said calmly. You're selling, because you're out of options, and frankly, you should be thanking me. Any other firm would liquidate you. Paul leaned forward, desperate. You want to run the company after everything. No, I said. I want to save it, and then rebuild it into something worthy. Under your name, Ryan snapped. No, under mine, Margaret Darnell. Because the Darnell name has a lot of cleanup to do. Paul's voice dropped. What about the house? I paused. The house you tricked me into signing away that was used as collateral without disclosure. We'll get to that. During the audit. He paled visibly. As the meeting adjourned, I gathered my materials. One more thing, I added, turning at the door. Tell Edith I said hello. And not to worry this time, I won't be folding her laundry. I walked out, heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. The war had begun. But I wasn't fighting with vengeance. I was fighting with facts. And I never lost with numbers on my side. The audit began on a rainy Monday morning. I arrived at the Darnell Freight Solutions office in slacks and a buttoned blouse, efficient, unadorned. I brought with me a single rolling case and an assistant from Lantern Fund, a sharp young analyst named Elena with a photographic memory and zero tolerance for nonsense. Paul greeted us at the front desk like a man awaiting surgery. Ryan didn't show. We were given a small windowless room to work from. Typical defensive move, hide the audit in a broom closet and hope it goes away. It didn't. I started with the basics: P&Ls, bank statements, vendor contracts. Elena worked the digital trail email logs, payment authorizations, ERP logs. Within 4 hours, we found the first crack: $70,000 in consulting payments to a shell company registered in Delaware under the name R2 Consulting. R2, Ryan Darnell. Classic. I flagged the transaction and kept going. Next came the real estate maneuver. I'd suspected the deed transfer of the house I'd once lived in. The one they'd tricked me into signing under the pretense of a temporary collateral shift. Only it hadn't been temporary. Ryan had refinanced the house not once, but twice. Both loans were in default. The property was now flagged for foreclosure. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd destroyed the one asset that tied our children to their childhood. I printed the documents, initialed the pages, and slid them into the growing evidence binder. I didn't react. Not visibly. But inside, something shifted. That night, I drove past the house on Belmont Avenue. The lights were off. The lawn, once trimmed weekly, had grown wild at the edges. Paint peeled from the porch rails. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, unmoving. They let it rot. On Wednesday, I confronted Paul in the boardroom. "You refinanced the house twice without notifying your co-signers." He looked confused, then defensive. I was trying to keep the business afloat. It wasn't personal. Forgery is never just business, I said. I didn't sign the second loan agreement. Yet somehow, my name is there. His face went white. "You're accusing me of fraud. I'm stating facts. And I've already forwarded them to Lantern's legal team." He dropped into the chair, head in his hands. "I didn't know Ryan did that." "Then you weren't paying attention," I said coldly, which explains everything. Later that afternoon, I received a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in 5 years. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I played it back in the audit room while Elena scrolled through payroll anomalies. Margaret came the voice, thin, wheezing. "It's Edith. I heard you're back. You always did have a flair for timing. Look, I may not have always been fair to you, but this vendetta," I paused the message. Vendetta. She still didn't get it. This wasn't revenge. This was reality tapping them on the shoulder and whispering, "You raised your voice at the wrong woman." By Friday, the audit was complete. We'd documented $312,000 in undocumented consulting fees paid to shell entities. Over $100,000 in personal charges labeled vendor entertainment. A forged mortgage application. Falsified IRS deductions. I uploaded the final report to Lantern's server and set a meeting with Claire and the investment board. At 9:00 p.m., I emailed Paul and Ryan. Subject: final audit findings. Body attached our Lantern Fund's audit results and offer for acquisition. You have 48 hours to accept. After that, we will be pursuing asset-backed enforcement through alternative means. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of anxiety, but clarity. This was no longer about them. It was about the woman they'd dismissed. The house they'd hollowed out. The truth they buried under paperwork and polite smiles. And I was done being polite. The email was sent Friday night. By Sunday afternoon, Ryan called, voice shaky, resentful. "This is blackmail." I didn't bother to argue. "No, Ryan. It's a buyout. You get to walk away. I get to clean house. You think you're some kind of hero," he spat. "You were just the maid. The invisible wife? You don't get to walk in here and pretend you built this." I let the silence stretch. "Then I didn't build it. I'm rebuilding it after you tore it to the ground." Click. On Monday morning, Paul arrived at the Lantern Fund's temporary Raleigh office in a wrinkled blazer and an expression I hadn't seen since the day he pitched our first logistics contract 15 years ago. Hope clinging to desperation. He didn't speak right away, just stood in the doorway, hat in hand, literally. A pathetic metaphor. "I accept the offer," he said. "We'll sign whatever you want." I nodded once. "You'll retain a 10% minority stake. No voting rights. Ryan's out entirely." He looked relieved and broken. "Will I still have a job? You'll stay on as a transition consultant. 6-month contract. Renewable only if your performance is satisfactory. You report to me." The old Paul would have scoffed, laughed, walked out. This Paul only said thank you. We signed the papers that afternoon. By 4 p.m., I legally owned 70% of Darnell Freight Solutions. By 4:30, I'd fired the accounting manager who ignored repeated IRS warnings, the operations lead, who never updated inventory logs, and Ryan, via couriered notice and immediate revocation of access credentials. I sent one final message to Edith. Subject status, update body. The house is being reclaimed as part of Lantern's asset recovery process. Your furniture will be stored for 30 days. After that, it will be considered abandoned. You may direct inquiries to our legal team. She never replied. Over the next 3 months, I turned the company inside out. I installed a modern fleet tracking system, brought in new leadership, 3 women from my Lantern network, with expertise in logistics operations and compliance. I implemented paid parental leave, transparent payroll, and a mentorship program for junior staff. Morale skyrocketed. Contracts stabilized. Vendors returned. We rebranded as Lantern Logistics, dropping the Darnell name completely. The new logo, a minimalist lighthouse, became a symbol of guidance, clarity, and strength. Our tagline, because stability isn't just a destination, it's a system. Paul kept to himself. He came in on time, took notes during meetings, answered only when asked. Sometimes I caught him staring at the new nameplates on the doors, the ones he used to control. One afternoon I found him alone in the conference room, flipping through an old brochure from the early days. "Do you remember when we printed these at Kinko's?" he asked softly. I nodded. "You miss it." He didn't answer for a long time. Then I missed the version of me you used to believe in. That night I met my children for dinner. Olivia had just returned from Duke for spring break. Grant had a robotics competition in Charlotte. They chose the restaurant downtown, noisy, casual. They were both taller than I remembered. Older, sharper. "You really own it now?" Olivia asked, eyes wide. I nodded. "And Dad works for you," Grant added, half laughing. "Technically, yes. Temporarily." There was a long pause. Then Olivia said, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I stared into my water glass. "Because I wanted you to form your own opinions, not just pick sides." Grant leaned in. "We picked already." That night, Olivia texted me, "You're incredible. I'm so proud of you. Not just for winning, for waiting. That takes real strength." I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the words etched in my mind. Not just for winning, for waiting. A week later, I received a handwritten letter on ivory stationery from Edith. "Margaret, I've been asked to vacate the house by next Friday. I suppose this is where dignity demands silence. But I will say this, I underestimated you. That was my mistake. Do what you must. I will not interfere again. Edie." I folded the letter, placed it in my desk drawer, next to the original forged mortgage deed. 2 artifacts from a war I had quietly won. No explosions, no screaming matches, no ruined reputations, just consequences delivered like a ledger balanced to the cent. The final line of the acquisition memo read, "Transition complete. Operations now stable. Recommend expansion potential high." I scribbled one final note at the bottom. They called me the maid. Now I own the house. It rained the morning of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our new headquarters in Asheville. One of those soft, cleansing spring rains that made everything smell like renewal. A year ago, Lantern Logistics had been a salvage operation. Today it was a blueprint for how failing companies could be rebuilt. Not with bluster, but with structure, empathy, and precision. I stood at the podium beneath a canopy of white canvas, facing a crowd of employees, press investors, and community leaders. The building behind me gleamed with glass and intention solar panels on the roof, a child care center inside, and walls designed to catch light from every angle. "We chose the lighthouse as our symbol," I began, "because in my darkest moment, what I needed wasn't rescue, it was clarity." Murmurs of agreement swept the audience. There was a time when I was told I wasn't enough. Not smart enough to be taken seriously. Not strong enough to build anything of my own. Not valuable enough to own the space I stood in. And for a long time, I believed it. I paused. But clarity came quietly, like the tide. It came in the form of silence, of separation, of rebuilding. Not out of spite, but out of truth. I looked out at the faces. Elena, now head of compliance. Claire in the front row, eyes shining. Olivia and Grant side by side, holding hands. I didn't rebuild this company to prove anyone wrong. I rebuilt it to prove myself right. And in doing so, I discovered something far more powerful than revenge purpose. The applause was instant and thunderous. I cut the ribbon with a pair of gold scissors engraved with the lantern logo. Inside, employees toasted with sparkling cider. A mural in the lobby painted by a local artist depicted a woman standing alone beneath a lighthouse, wind in her hair, the sea rising behind her but her eyes steady on the light. 3 weeks later, I was invited to speak at the Women in Finance Summit in Atlanta. I shared the stage with CEOs, attorneys, fund managers. My panel was titled, "When the Exit is the Beginning, Reclaiming Power After Personal Collapse." Afterward, a woman approached me in the hotel lobby. She was in her 50s, with calloused hands and a tired smile. "You're the one who used to work in a cafe, right?" she asked. I blinked. Yes. She reached into her tote and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A resume. "I've been running a catering business out of my garage. I heard you help women get capital, real capital, not just advice. Think you could take a look?" I smiled. "I'd be honored." Back in Raleigh, Paul moved into a modest condo near Lake Johnson. He still showed up to quarterly board meetings, quiet, prepared, deferential. We rarely spoke outside of business. One day after a meeting adjourned early, he lingered. "I saw the photos from the new headquarters," he said. "Looks powerful." "It is." He hesitated. "Do you hate me?" I thought about that. About the house, the forged papers, the years. "No," I said finally. "But I'm not the woman you left. And you're not the man I married." He nodded slowly. Maybe that's the most honest thing we've ever said to each other. The night of Lantern's 2-year anniversary, we held a small private dinner. No press. Just staff, a few investors, and the women whose companies we'd helped finance: a robotics founder, a vineyard owner, a former paralegal who now ran a legal tech startup with 8 employees. We toasted with wine from one of our own clients. Olivia made the final toast. To my mom, she said, raising her glass. "Who taught me that silence is not weakness, that patience is not passivity, and that the best way to rise is to rise?" The room erupted. People stood. Some cried. I did. Late that night, I returned to my office alone. I lit the small lamp on my desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a copy of the quitclaim deed I'd once been pressured to sign. On top of it, the first business card I ever printed: Margaret Darnell, founder, Lantern Fund. Next to it sat a silver frame photo of my kids' arms around me in Asheville, and taped inside the drawer was a single line I'd scribbled years ago in a battered notebook when everything felt like collapse. "Let them call you the maid. Just make sure you keep the keys." And I had. I'd kept the keys. To the house, to the company, to myself. The storm had passed, and I had become the lighthouse. So tell me, where are you watching from? I love seeing this community grow across cities, countries, and continents. Drop a comment below and let me know how this story made you feel. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Each one is crafted to move, inspire, and remind you that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate